Luther King III, Charles Blow, and also Van Jones. So, Martin, you heard Ava DuVernay talk about your father, said your father would be marching along with the protesters today. Charles mentioned it as well. Do you agree?
Well, I certainly believe that he knew and effectively utilized protest, but he also added the dynamic of public policy. The Birmingham campaign created the Civil Rights Act of '64. Obviously, the Selma campaign created the Voting Rights Act. The Chicago campaign helped to create fair housing legislation that was passed just 10 days after his assassination. So quite naturally, yes, I would say that he would certainly be a part, but I would also have to say that had he lived, maybe we would not be at this juncture. Perhaps our nation would be a much different nation, and a nation and even our world.
Good point, Charles. You know, in the film, we see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fight so hard against racially based voting discrimination. And when you look at the polling, you don't see that young people vote as often as many would like. Why do you think it's so low among young people, and especially young minorities?
You know, I mean, I think that there is that you have ups and downs, right? There are peaks and valleys. So that during presidential election years, you get a bit of a bump. In off years, you get a really deep valley. And I think that part of that is strategic on the hand of people who want to suppress votes, right? So you know, if you get the young vote to be suppressed, if you get minority votes to be suppressed, if you get the votes of poor people to be suppressed, then you can get a lift, basically strengthening the votes that do get cast. And that strategy has worked. And I think there's a real strand out there that says that there's no real difference, that my vote does not count. That is a strategic plot by people who want to exploit youthful idealism and make sure that it does not succeed and blossom and go to the ballot.
But as we know, every vote counts, and all of the thousands and thousands of people who are out there marching, their votes will count. And they should all be registered to vote and get out. Everyone should vote. Van, I have to ask you this because on Thursday, Ava DuVernay, who's a director, became the first black woman to be nominated for Best Director at the Golden Globes. Selma was also nominated as Best Drama Film. We've been talking a lot about diversity, or the lack of it in Hollywood, with the leaked emails and what have you. How important are these milestones in Hollywood?
I think they're very, very important. I mean, first of all, you do have this young generation that's trying to find its way. A lot of them, you know, they had a big celebratory moment in their lives with Obama's election. That seems like a long time ago for us, but if you're a young person, for many of the people you see out there marching, their first vote was for President Obama. Many of them feel, unfortunately, that maybe they didn't get everything out of that vote. So then what's the next thing? Well, it's Occupy Wall Street, marching around trying to get the financial elite to be held accountable. Now you have this moment. You see this generation trying to find its voice, trying to find its way. Social media, social protests. Why? Because so far, no one has been able to come forward and really give them an answer.
And can you comment on the Hollywood part? Because I want to get to this other subject. I think it's really important.
Yeah. But media is so important for this generation, really for all generations. But I think these breakthroughs, where you have an African American woman who's finally been able to have a movie that everybody's talking about. She's already being recognized for that. I think it's huge. It gives people a sense that maybe their voices can be heard, not just in the streets, not just in social media, but also on the big screen, and that's huge.
This is what I want to get to, because this is a terrifying story. It's out of North Carolina. It's a mother and brother of a high school star athlete claim that their brother, was killed, hanged, or killed, and then hanged, a victim of lynching. Take a listen to this.
Do you believe your son was lynched?
Yes.
He may have either been strangled somewhere else and been placed there, or he was hung there while people were around watching him die.
I want to know your reaction, Van, because in the wake of his hanging, some wondered if he was killed or lynched because he was in an interracial relationship. Racial tension can often exist just below the surface, and this is in North Carolina, it's the South, and we've been talking about Selma in the South.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is a really, really tragic case. There's simply no reason to believe this young man would kill himself. He was, he was a very outgoing young guy. He was talking about sports all the time. He was, at 17, in a relationship with a 31-year-old white woman. That raised a lot of eyebrows. physically, it's very hard to figure out how this guy who was relatively short could get up on that thing by himself and hang himself. The belt doesn't match, the shoes are wrong. Something happened there, and I'm very, very concerned that there was Klan activity in the weeks prior. This young man's grave was desecrated. There's something that is going on in that town and needs to be taken very seriously. Racism is not over. Even the worst kinds of racism is not over in this country, and we'd be very, very foolish to believe it is.
We'll continue to follow as police continue to investigate there. Thank you very much, Van. Thank you, Martin III, and also thank you, Charles Blow. Appreciate all of you. Oh, right. When we come right back, a 22-year-old black man with an air rifle shot by police in the middle of Walmart. Why did police interrogate the dead man's girlfriend? That's next. We have news tonight on the case of John Crawford, a 22-year-old African-American man who was shot by police inside an Ohio Walmart. That was back in August. The police officer who shot Crawford thought he was carrying a gun through the store. He was actually holding a BB gun that he picked up off the shelves of that Walmart. Now we are learning about the police interrogation of the dead man's girlfriend. I want to bring in CNN's Nick Valencia. Nick Valencia joining us now from Atlanta with more on that. Nick, I understand there's news today about the Crawford case. Never before seen video of a police interrogation. Tell us about it.
It's newly released tape to the Guardian newspaper, and in this tape, Don, it seems to show a local police detective that went just a little bit too far. Shows the girlfriend of John Crawford, Tasha Thomas, being questioned by a local detective who's appearing to aggressively question her, trying to coerce her into saying that Crawford brought a gun to Walmart.
You and John went in Walmart. At some point, as I understand it, John produced a gun. You were with him just moments before that.
I understand that, yes, sir.
Okay, tell me where you got the gun from.
Sir, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
And the truth is, you knew at some point he did carry a gun, isn't it? Is
No,
the truth?
sir. No, sir, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know.
Gosh, I'm having trouble with this.
Please give me a lighter, sir.
That might come in the future, but
Please. He knew nothing.
Very emotional interrogation. It's a total of 90 minutes, and we've learned tonight that that detective's name is Rodney Kurd. And a part of this tape I'm going to play for you next, Don, he questions the sobriety of Thomas.
Are you under the influence of anything?
No.
Been drinking?
No.
Drugs?
No.
See, I know your eyes are kind of messed up looking, and you seem a little lethargic at times, but I don't know if it's because you're upset or not. I just want to make sure what's
I have been
going on.
the only medicine I took today was my medicine early this morning, and it's called Atipex. And I haven't took anything since.
You got a prescription for that?
Yes, sir.
Now, in police documents that we received earlier tonight, Rodney Kurd, that detective, tries to explain himself, saying that he essentially didn't have all the facts during the course of that interrogation. He said it was only until afterwards that he learned that that gun was taken off the store shelves there at Walmart and that Crawford didn't bring it in himself.
And the family attorney was not aware that this tape even existed until yesterday. You spoke with the Crawford family attorney. What did he say? What was his reaction to this video?
So I talked to Michael Wright, and he said that 2 months ago he asked for the Bureau of Investigation to give him all documents, all evidence related to this case. And it was only this weekend that police sent him these documents. But as some of you may know, Crawford's family and mother was at this rally, Justice for All rally in Washington, D.C. They didn't look at this evidence until yesterday. He said the first time that he heard about it officially was from the Guardian newspaper when the reporter called him. He says he's livid, he's angry, and it shows that police bungled the case. He says tomorrow he plans to file a lawsuit against the police department. He's not very happy. The police department, we've reached out to them, we should mention, Don, and they still have not gotten back to us.
The last thing they waited till the very end to tell her that he was dead.
Yeah, that's another thing. At that point, when she's being interrogated by the police detective, she has no idea that her boyfriend had died.
Wow. All right, Nick Valencia. Nick, thank you very much. I understand that. Nick, before I let you go, are they planning legal action against the department?
Yeah, the attorney Michael Wright, I spoke to him earlier. He says he plans to go forward with this lawsuit. They're going to have a press conference tomorrow morning. He says that this case is far from over, Don.
All right, Nick, thank you very much. I want to bring back in now Charles Blow and Van Jones. Charles, a newly released video showed police harshly interrogating the girlfriend that you saw there who was with him at that store. What do you make of that?
Well, it's really hard to watch, right? I mean, it's she's just lost her boyfriend. According to her, they just came to the store to get ingredients to make s'mores for a cookout. And he winds up shot and and killed. And as you mentioned before, it seems like this detective is trying to make her confess to something that simply is not true, and is incredibly aggressive, incredibly, indelicate about his approach to her. And if at some point he knows, I think that there's a point at which he comes to know during the course of his interrogation that the boyfriend has in fact died. But if he is continuing to press with that knowledge, I think it's really callous. I think people look at that and think that it's really callous.
Van, you're an attorney. As you look at that interrogation video, is that out of the ordinary?
Well, unfortunately, it's not out of the ordinary. I mean, one of the things that we're going to have to stop doing is excusing the inexcusable. Why are the people out here marching in the streets? Is it really just because this one kid they never met died in some town they've never been to? No, it's because there is a growing sense of a pattern and practice of just a disregard for the humanity of some parts of our population. That young man, by the way, was, I understand, an open carry state. Had he been walking around with a gun, a real gun, he was within his rights to do so. He hadn't threatened anyone. He wasn't doing anything, and he actually had basically a toy BB gun. They came in. There was a big fight about the video earlier. When the video was released, it turned out that what the cops said about the incident wasn't true. The video disproved it. So you're now in this weird moment now where video keeps showing that what the protesters are saying is true. That there is some disconnect between what we hope our officers are doing out there every day and what too many of them are actually doing when they come into contact with certain parts of our population. And we've got to begin to stop excusing the inexcusable. That kind of harsh interrogation of people who are grieving. Let's not forget the mother of Tamir Rice, who had seen her 12-year-old boy gunned down, was then stuck in a police car next to the officer that shot her son. And apparently that was a very traumatic experience. We've got to, I think law enforcement can be retrained to be more sensitive to the humanity of people before, during, and most importantly, after some of these events where they do things that make things so much worse.
We're having a town hall tomorrow with a live audience with police officers, so make sure you tune into that. But stick with me, gentlemen. Coming up, with protests over the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, will the killing of John Crawford add to the unrest in our streets? More on that next. Welcome back, everyone. Michael Brown and Eric Garner's deaths have led to protests all across the country. Grand juries in both cases, as well as John Crawford's death, decided not to indict the officers who killed these men. That's led to some people asking this: the court system, is it failing the black community? I want to bring back Charles Blow and also Van Jones. So, Charles, I want to ask you both again, the grand jury in the Crawford case, white police officer, grand jury deciding not to indict them. Do you think there are parallels with this and with Eric Garner and Michael Brown?
Well, the obvious parallel is the dynamic, the racial dynamic involved. The obvious parallel is that the grand jury chose not to indict. And I think, I'm always telling people to push back from the individual cases and look at the data set as a whole, not just the data points, but the data set, and look at the trends that represent themselves across the cases. And when you do that, it is really hard to argue that that there is equity in the system in terms of justice and how it is meted out, and who is believed and who is not believed, and whether or not you can transpose the racial identities of the people involved and still believe that the cases would turn out exactly the way that they did in those particular cases. Would the person still be dead? If they were dead and you knew who did it, would that person not at least get an indictment, if not go to trial? And if they went to trial, might they be convicted? If you cannot transpose the racial identities of people and still believe that you would get the same outcome, then it's really hard to argue that there's equity in the system. And I think that's what you're seeing in the streets, is people are saying, I can't transpose it in my mind and see it come out the same way.
So I have to ask you this, Van, because as he said, to look at the broader picture rather than just the individual things. But if a white person or black person or whomever is walking around the Walmart wielding a gun, can you just do that and not suffer some consequences? That's the question.
In that state, apparently so, because my understanding that's an open carry state where you actually are allowed to carry guns. And so, but more importantly, I want to make a very conservative argument on behalf of the protesters. This is not a liberal thing. when you're a parent and you're raising your kids, you say, listen, if you do something wrong, there needs to be consequences. Otherwise, you're going to keep doing the same bad thing. The problem we have right now is that there apparently are no consequences for police officers going way outside of their training, way outside of common sense, and sometimes violating what a lot of people look at least on video, and say that seems to violate the law. Impunity is something that the United States says to countries around the world you don't want to see in your security forces, your police forces. What does that mean? And there are countries where things get so far out of whack that security forces simply are above the law. We have never wanted that in the United States. We want everyone to obey the law, including the police. So I'm making a very conservative argument here. We seem to now be in a place where police and prosecutors are just simply not able to police themselves. Therefore, we should have more federal oversight. We should have more checks and balances, so that if you don't have a good officer looking at a bad officer getting away with bad stuff day after day, at some point the whole morale and the whole professionalism of law enforcement can start to sink. And that's a danger for everybody, not just black people.
Hey, I've got 20 seconds left, Charles. People are raising serious questions about the fairness of the grand jury system. Is it time to look at alternate ways to look at police behavior?
Well, I mean, you could look at alternate ways, but I think, the idea of having an independent prosecutor is actually a really smart way to deal with that. And also, I think we have to get down to the gut of the bias involved in what, these are grand jurors are actual human beings that come out of the population, go into those grand jury rooms, and they bring whatever biases they have with them. Okay. And so who believes that someone is wielding a gun? As you said before, there's, that Walmart is covered with cameras. Show me him wielding
Walmart
a gun.
sell guns. He was there to buy guns.
But show me him threatening someone. Show me the 12-year-old in Cleveland threatening someone with a gun. We are now just basically taking what people say and saying that what they say is true. I want the evidence.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. We'll be right back.
The St. Louis County prosecutor has released new documents into the grand jury investigation of Michael Brown's death. Ana Guerrero shows us how witness testimony impacted the decision not to indict the officer who fatally shot Brown.
Good evening. More than 2 weeks after a St. Louis County grand jury did not indict Officer Darren Wilson in the killing of Michael Brown, new revelations about the evidence that drove their decision. Witnesses admitted to lying.
Some witnesses admitted